Hey, welcome. Ever stop and think about who actually writes the rulebook for a country with, over 330 million people? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the US government and see exactly how a simple idea becomes the law of the land. So, let's just dive right in.
So let's start with the big question right up front. How are America's rules actually made? I mean, it's not like one person just wakes up and makes a decision. It's this really complex, really intentional system that's designed to be careful, deliberate, and most importantly, to stop any one person from getting way too much power.
And the secret sauce, the core idea that makes the whole thing work, is this: separation of power. The founders split the government into three distinct branches. You've got the legislative to make the laws, the executive to enforce them, and the judicial to interpret them. And look, this wasn't just about making a neat org chart. It was a safety feature built right in to keep any one part of the government from getting too powerful.
Okay, so to really get how this all works, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the blueprint. Before a single law was ever written, there was a whole philosophy about power itself.
And this really powerful idea, it comes from a French philosopher, Baron de Montesquieu. His insight, which you see right here, was pretty revolutionary. He said that to keep a government from abusing its power, you have to build a system where power is forced to check itself. It's not about hoping you get good leaders. It's about making the system the guard against tyranny. So his whole argument basically boils down to three simple but brilliant rules that became the bedrock of the US Constitution. First, you've got to separate power into different departments. Second, you give each of those departments a way to check or block the others. And third, you make sure it's all balanced out so no single part can ever take over.
All right, so with that blueprint in our back pocket, let's start the journey of an actual law. And our first stop is with the branch of government that was designed specifically to be the nation's rulemakers.
And that would be the legislative branch, set up by the very first article of the Constitution. We call it Congress, and its number one job is to make the laws. This is where ideas, all the debates, and what the public wants are hammered into official legislation.
Now, Congress isn't just one big room of people. It's actually split into two parts, or houses. You've got the House of Representatives with 435 members based on how many people live in each state. It's supposed to be the House of the people, right? Then you have the Senate. Every state gets two senators, no matter how big or small, to represent the interests of the states themselves. This whole two-part thing makes sure that both the people and the states get a say.
And we're not talking small potatoes here. Their powers are immense. Congress controls all the money, all the federal spending and taxes. They regulate trade. They're the only ones who can declare war, and they have the ultimate check on everybody else, the power of impeachment. This place is truly the engine room of the government.
Okay, so Congress makes the laws. Great, but what is a law exactly? Well, before a rule can actually be enforced, you got to understand that not all laws are created equal. There's a definite hierarchy. Yeah, you can really think of it like a pyramid. Right at the very top, the peak, is the US Constitution. It's the supreme law of the land, and nothing can violate it. So a federal law passed by Congress is going to beat a state law, and a state law is going to beat a local city ordinance. This whole structure makes sure there's a unified legal system, even though you have laws being made at all these different levels. Now, within this whole hierarchy, laws pretty much fall into two big buckets. You've got criminal law, which is about crimes against society, like theft or assault. That's when the government itself prosecutes somebody. Then you have civil law. That's all about disputes between people or companies, like a contract fight or a lawsuit. One can land you in jail, the other usually just costs you money.
And these examples really make it click, right? Two women are suspected of stealing a Rolex watch. The sheriff's office, part of the government, gets involved. That's a criminal case. But then you have car owners suing General Motors for billions of dollars. That's a civil case. It's just private parties fighting it out, not the government trying to punish someone.
So, Congress passed a bill. We know what kind of law it is. But, a law on a piece of paper is, well, it's just words. We need someone to actually put it into action. And that brings us to the executive branch.
And yep, that's the job of the executive branch, laid out in Article 2 of the Constitution and, of course, led by the president. So if Congress makes the laws, the president's main job, according to the Constitution, is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. In other words, they enforce them.
And the president's power is absolutely vast. They're not just some administrator. They're the commander-in-chief of the entire military, they're the nation's top diplomat, and they get to appoint all the key government officials. And, maybe most importantly, they hold a massive check on Congress, the power to veto.
to just flat out reject a bill.
Now, obviously, the president doesn't enforce all these laws alone. They're the head of this huge network of administrative agencies. These are the specialized groups, like the FDA, the EPA, NASA, that have all the expert knowledge to handle specific parts of the government. So what do these agencies actually do? Well, they kind of have three main jobs. They advise the president, think of the National Security Council. They enforce laws, like the FBI does. And this is a big one, they make regulations. Those are the nitty-gritty, detailed rules that turn a big, broad law from Congress into something that actually works in the real world.
Here's a perfect way to think about it. Congress might pass a law that just says food must be safe. Okay, but what does that actually mean? Well, it's the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that creates all the specific rules for labeling, for handling, for testing, all the stuff you rely on every single time you walk into a grocery store. They turn the big idea into a practical rule.
Okay, so we've seen the blueprint, we've met the rule makers, and we've met the enforcers. Now let's put it all together and see this entire system in motion.
And here it is, the whole journey of a law, all laid out. It starts with that blueprint of separated powers. An idea becomes a bill in Congress. If it passes both houses, it goes to the president, who can sign it or veto it. If it gets signed, the executive agencies get to work putting it into action. And all along the way, each branch is checking the others, keeping the whole thing in balance. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And believe me, that's by design.
Which, brings us to our final thought. This really intricate system, designed over 200 years ago with quill pens and by candlelight, is now being used to solve these incredibly complex 21st century problems. It was built for slow, careful deliberation, not for speed. So the question that we're left with is, how does this old machinery adapt for what's coming? What's next?